Nobody builds 5G like Verizon builds 5G, because we're the engineers who built the most reliable network in America. And the more you do with 5G, the more building it right matters. The more your network matters. The more Verizon engineers going the extra mile matters. It's us pushing us. It's Verizon versus Verizon. 5G built right from America's most reliable network. Most reliable based on rankings from RootMetrics second half 2020 U.S. report of 3 mobile networks. Results may vary. Award is not an endorsement.
The following is a Hoop Ball presentation.
Good morning, Hoop Ballers, and welcome to another edition of Hoop Ball's DFS Today. This is your Saturday, May 29th edition. I am your host, Santino and I am here joined by our guy, Matt Cooper. How you doing today, Matt?
I'm doing pretty good, my friend. Week has gone pretty well so far. Been playing pretty much every slate, so I feel like I'm got a pretty good grip of what's going on in the slates. Should be some interesting decision points to make on this day, especially as we've got these Saturdays that kind of go all day long. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. And every time I say Cooper, I just want to use the basketball reference there. Coop. But I digress.
Fine, Ben.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good slate. We got a good one on our hands. We're back to a 4-gamer here. First game starts at 1, then 4, then 7, then 9. We got basketball all day on this Saturday. But before we jump into the slate, I do want to give a quick shout-out to our guys over at MyBookie, simply the best sports book around. If you're not familiar with MyBookie, you still have a lot of time, and sports really don't end. But you can bet on any type of sport that you want, any type of over-under line, whatever the case may be, futures. And they also have a fully fledged casino platform. Oh, there's my buddy. Fully fledged casino platform with live dealers all around, 24 hours. So you have a full casino at your fingertips. And if you want to get your first deposit matched halfway up to $1,000, just simply enter the promo code HoopBall. That's HOOPBALL. All right, man. Let's jump right into this first game of the slate. We have the Milwaukee Bucks at the Miami Heat again for Game 4. The Heat are down 0-3. They are on their home turf to try and get one in here, but we have a 222 game total with the the Bucks a 4.5 point home favorite. On the injury report, we have Victor Oladipo as out for the Heat, and the Bucks have Thanasis and DiVincenzo both out, and Giannis is probable here. I'll throw it over to you, man. We'll start with the Heat. The Bucks. They are the away team, but who are you looking on this side of the ball?
Yeah, so I'm pretty curious to what Milwaukee's going to do with their starting lineup here. Obviously, with DiVincenzo out, they're going to be looking to fill that one of those guard roles. So we could see either Bryn Forbes or Pat Connaughton step into that. My intuition thinks that it might be Connaughton just for his defensive role. So the nice part about this one is it's the first game of the slate, so we'll know who that's going to be. If Connaughton steps into that role as a starter, I'll like him a lot. Kind of the same way it goes with Forbes. Like both of these guys will likely see a decent rise in their minutes. I guess there is a little bit of a worry with them seeing a drop in their production and a drop in their usage where they're used to coming off the bench. But yeah, a little bit strange with Giannis popping up on the injury report as probable. Throughout the season, we've seen the Bucks in general be kind of wild with probable guys end up being ruled out just before. So keep an eye out for that prior to the tip. Middleton and Holiday have both seen their prices drop quite a bit, which I think is going to be my key focus. I think if I'm going to spend here, I'd like to go to Middleton and Holiday before I go to Giannis. I'm expecting a close game here. The spread is the lowest it's been all series pretty much. I expect Miami to kind of be fighting for their lives a little bit, and with that, you should see big minutes for the key Milwaukee players.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see who gets the starting nod as well. If it's Bryn Forbes, I'm really not too interested in him. I wouldn't hate it because you're getting probably a 25 to 30 minute guy at just 3,600. But he has occasional big games. Outside of that, doesn't really do much. But Pat Connaughton is more intriguing to me. $200 less. He has had a lot more success, especially this year. So that's something that I'm looking at. But yeah, I'm with you. I think you can look at Holiday again. That's the guy that I'm mainly looking at, especially with Giannis probable. But I don't think there's anything to that. I guess if you do, and if there is something before the game starts, Bobby Portis gets a bump, and he's only 4K anyway, so that's a solid play. But yeah, I'm not. For me, it's Holiday's the guy that I'm looking at, Connaughton, and not looking to necessarily spend up to Giannis on a 4-game slate right now.
Yeah, I think we've got some pretty good other spends that we can get to later on in some of these other games, especially Denver-Portland. So
Yeah.
definitely, I think Giannis kind of just falls through the cracks a little bit here.
For me personally, I don't hate Giannis, but the way that the Heat have been playing, and it's just been absolutely terrible. They can't hit anything. They can't hit. I don't want to be cliche, but they can't hit water if they fell out of a boat right now. This game might not stay that close. I can't imagine that they're going to go out like this, but their shooting has been so brutal. They don't need to throw Giannis out there a lot for 35-plus minutes. They can still win this game and then have a big layoff until the first round ends.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I should. I'm going to echo you a little bit on the Bryn Forbes comments. Like the one game, I think it was game 2 that he just got super hot from 3, and they really extended out his minutes there. That was a pretty unique situation that I don't think is really going to happen again. So with a guy that only really scores the ball and really depends on scoring, that really depends on his fantasy output just through hitting shots, it's generally not somebody you want to roster.
All right, man. And flipping on over to the other side of the ball, how you feeling about this Miami Heat squad?
I'm nervous. I think that I'm guessing that Eric Spoelstra is going to do something weird with his starting lineup. We saw Dragic step into that starting role last game where they previously had none, and I expect that to continue. But the interesting thing that I think they might do here is I'm going to butcher his name, but Nemanja Bjelica, I think is going to have a pretty significant role in this game. In the fourth quarter of last game, when they were getting blown out by 26 going into the quarter, they ended up trotting out a lineup that had Bjelica alongside like basically Butler, Dragic, Adebayo, and all of their main guys. And for about a 2 to 3 minute stretch, they got pretty hot and on the offensive end and actually found some flow to their game. Nemanja can stretch the floor out for them. So I am kind of nervous, but I think there's a chance that he might start for Ariza in this game. So once again, like first game of the day, we'll know this before lock. Keep an eye out for that. So I think he's a pretty sneaky value play. Also, I think that Jimmy is actually a really good play today. I have no confidence in Bam just with how he's performed, even at kind of that season low price tag of 7,400. But Jimmy actually came out and was the only one really playing well for them in the last game. And I expect like back against the wall, down 3-0, he's going to leave it all out there. And usually that results in a pretty good fantasy game for him.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm want to see exactly what Spoelstra does with this lineup because the way that they've been playing and the way that they've been getting just annihilated. Outside that first game where they could have won it. They could have easily won that first game. Wound up losing by 2. Fought hard, but these last 2 games have been just brutal. Now they're 0-3 with their backs against the wall. I do like Butler at 8,600. He's the only person that's shown up this entire series, and especially he scored half their points last game in the first half. He had 14, and they had like 30 points. They had under 30 points at near 20 minutes of game time. It was just brutal. But I'm interested to see what he does with the lineup because, like you mentioned, Bielitsa, he could possibly start. Maybe Spoelstra just goes to empty the tank and starts like Precious or whoever it may be. He could change these things, and you could get a very solid value guy down there. But outside of any major changes, if there is none, I can only look at Butler right now because of the way everybody's playing and the credit the Bucks with their defense and not credit the Heat for the way that they're shooting. But I think for me, Butler is the only guy I can trust right now, and then I'll wait to see exactly what changes Spoelstra makes, like you mentioned.
From earaches to strep tests, there's MinuteClinic at CVS. See a provider, fill a prescription, and grab essentials. Or see us online with telehealth options. That's healthier made easier. Visit MinuteClinic at CVS today. Services vary by location. See MinuteClinic.com for details.
Yeah, it's really kind of sad watching this so far, especially with Bam. We've seen that he's capable of putting out massive fantasy games in the past. He's a capable triple double guy, but his confidence right now just looks completely shot. And Brook Lopez is doing a really good job against him.
And on the flip side, Giannis, he was the Giannis stopper, but Giannis has had a great series so far. So
going into that
credit to him.
Yeah, going into that first game last Saturday, I thought that this series was just made for Bam to do well, and he just has not shown up to the table.
Not at all, man. But let's jump on over to this next game, and this one starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's important to note that the weekend games are spread out, which makes for a fun day of basketball. The weekday games, as we were talking on before, or alluding to before we went on the show, I don't know what the schedule guy did, but he decided to just jam them all together so you have to pick and choose or flip back and forth between games. It's very obnoxious, but the weekend, you don't really have to, except for missing the first portion of the start of the game for the next one occasionally. But yeah, this one starts at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is the Nuggets at the Blazers. We have a 228.5 game total, which is a half point under the next game for the highest. And the Blazers are 3.5 point home favorites. The Nuggets took a couple games in a row here, but on the injury report, we have Will Barton, PJ Dozier, Jamal Murray all out for the Nuggets. TJ Leaf probable, and Zach Collins as out for the Portland Trail Blazers. We'll start with the Nuggets, man. They are the away team. I'll throw it over to you. 2 in a row here. Bunch of different guards stepping up and players stepping up. But how are you looking at when you're looking at the Nuggets?
Yeah, so I can't believe that the Denver guards are kind of being able to keep up with Portland here. We saw the Austin Rivers last game with him hitting 37 minutes, hitting 5 threes, a bunch of those down the stretch as well. I think that is a bit of a trap going into this game. He's probably going to garner some ownership at only 4.3K on DraftKings, just with that fantasy output that he had last game. But I'm not really looking at Rivers too much. I think that I've played Monte Morris every slate that he's been on so far in this series, and I think that will probably continue. I think he's the best guard on their team, even with Campazzo. He knows how to run the offense with Nikola Jokic really well. They have a lot of Michael Malone has a lot of trust in Morris, just off his past performance over the years. So he kind of got, I think, a little unlucky with how hot Rivers got last game that took away some of his minutes. He still put up decent numbers as a pretty good value play. And then besides that, I think that Jokic is the best spend on the slate. Portland has continued to guard him just one-on-one with Jusuf Nurkic throughout the series. They've tried to take away his playmaking abilities, and all that's resulted in is Jokic scoring 36 points a game with more than 56 DraftKings points in each of the 3 first games. Weirdly enough, he hasn't really got over that 35-minute threshold, which I find a little unlucky in a way. They've tried out Paul Millsap purely as the backup center. And Millsap has been able to give them really good minutes, actually, which I think has limited the upside a little bit on Jokic. But this is the biggest game of the series with Denver up 2-1. You go up 3-1 on Portland, and that's pretty much putting them in their grave, where the opposite way, you've got a brand new series starting at 2-2. So I would expect Jokic to kind of get up to that high 30 range. And I think that's going to end up being the best spend on the slate, I should say. Finally, I guess Michael Porter Jr., I've played him a bunch too. He's been pretty chalky over the last couple slates, and he just really hasn't done enough on the peripheral side of things. Hasn't rebounded the ball that well. He's shot the ball okay from threes, but just hasn't really done enough. And he's been guarded pretty tightly. All of the shots he's made have been really tough. So pretty sure I'll be trying to stay away a little bit from that.
Yeah, and I like that. All these guards have shown some moments over there, but I do like Monte Morris the best as well. Austin Rivers, got to give it to him, though. Last game, he was just on fire at the end. The first one, I was like, okay, Austin. Then the second one, then the third one, and he was just feeling it. So good for him, and he was really the difference maker in that fourth quarter. If he didn't have that hot streak right there, they probably are down 2-1. But good for him. I do prefer Morris. I think he's a better per-minute guy, even after that hot shooting performance by Rivers. So I do love that $4,500 price tag for him. Campazzo, I think, is a decent play. I don't really want to go to that 6K mark for him. He just keeps going up, but, I mean, he's bringing back value, and he's doing good, and he's playing really well. They're making him the number one facilitator, and he's playing really well because of that. Jokic, you mentioned him. I think he's super safe for 50 points. Super safe for 50 points. I just don't know if he has that 70-point upside. They are, like you mentioned as well, taking away his playmaking ability and making him just score. And he's scoring over 30 points every game, and you can't complain about that. But his upside remains, to me, limited for his price tag, just because hasn't been able to do everything else that we've been accustomed to of whenever you roster Jokic. But I think super safe for 50 points, 50 to 60 points there, just the higher upside. I'm not huge on it, but that's not saying 50, 60 is anything to sneeze at. That could still lead the slate here like it did the other night. And Porter Jr., you mentioned him. I still kind of like him. If I can squeeze him in there, I will. But now that we have an extra game, he's teetering on the edge of my player pool because he hasn't been doing the greatest, and then they have been doing a really good job on him. But I'm going to see if I can get him in there. But right now, he's teetering in the line of do I play him or not.
Yeah, I've been kind of surprised in general just how little he's been involved in some of their offense. We've seen a lot more shots come from Aaron Gordon. Even Campazzo has been pretty open to firing them up. So I was expecting going into the series to see MPJ shooting at least 20 shots a game, and we've only seen 11 and 13 over the last two, which is really weird to me.
Exactly. Let's jump on over to the other side of the ball, man. Portland, and you alluded to it. They are down 1-2 in this series, and if they go down to 3-1, it's kind of like a big dagger to their hearts, especially losing 2 at home. But how you feeling about this side of the ball?
Yeah, so some interesting things that Portland did in their last game. We saw Enes Kanter get completely eliminated from the rotation in the second half. I wouldn't be surprised if that continued right into this game. They gave Rondé Hollis-Jefferson some minutes at the 5, and Rondé's always been a pretty good defender. Obviously, he's not going to be a Jokic stopper just because of the size. But as much as they can match those minutes with Nurkic and Jokic, I think that Hollis-Jefferson might get the other center minutes. In the last game that these guys played, I pretty much stacked up this game, and it was looking really nice. You saw a lot of production from kind of the peripheral pieces from Portland. Norm Powell had a really good game, kind of slowed down at the end, but we saw kind of what these guys are capable of. I think CJ is probably my favorite piece tonight. With all the attention that Dame's getting, especially when Aaron Gordon matches up to him, they really like to give CJ the ball and let him operate in space. It didn't. He scored the ball really well last game and rebounded the ball really well. He just didn't quite get enough. Still eclipsed 40 fantasy points at a tag of in the low 7Ks. So I'll probably be going back to him again. Nurkic has been really solid, although he's looked really, really tired and really, really fatigued by all the work that he's having to do against Jokic. I think that's probably going to start catching up to him a little bit in the series, but kind of similar sentiment to what I said before. Like when you're down 2-1 and you've got a home game, Portland's going to be putting it all on the line here to try to even the series back up and see what they can do going back into Denver. So CJ and Nurk are my two favorite pieces. I think that Dame has one of the highest ceilings on the slate just because of how unstoppable the scorer he is. But just with how much attention I think that Denver's going to give to him, I'd rather go again with these kind of peripheral pieces in Portland and their secondary scorers.
And I think it's interesting when you mentioned especially after Nurkic left at the backup center spot, Melo was playing a lot on Jokic at the back end of the second half there. Him and Covington were sharing the front court. So Melo is a guy I'm looking at. If he's going to get extra minutes at 4,100, we know he can score the ball. This is a do-or-die game. Melo loves these moments. He's going to take shots when he's open, and that's a guy I'll try and take some shots at. He didn't do much outside of scoring, much at all outside of scoring, but he still dropped 17 points. If he can add a couple other things out there, that's pretty solid value at only 4,100. I think Covington's another guy, 47. He only went up to 47. I don't mind taking shots at. You mentioned Nurkic. I don't hate that price tag, but I do like Damian Lillard, and I will probably have a lot of shares of him. Down 2-1. He should get a lot of defensive attention, but he's going to make this Dame time, and he's going to make this try and put this team on his back like he's done many of times. And this is a perfect scenario at home, down 2-1, backs against the wall right now. They desperately need to tie this series up. They can't go back to Denver down 3-1. This is where I want to pay for Dame, and I'll pay up for Dame. I think he has 50-point floor, maybe not 70-point upside like I mentioned with Jokic, but you can get 50 points out of him, 55, probably 60, and you don't have to pay over 10K. It's 9.6 is nothing to sneeze at, but I really do like Dame in this setting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like, as much as I like kind of the peripheral pieces of Portland, I just like this game the most on the slate in general. I think no matter what kind of pieces you take on either side, this is going to be the best game environment of the day, in my opinion. And we saw not in the last game, but the game before that, game 2, where Dame was actually on track to play the entire second half of the game until they kind of started getting blown out at the end a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised in this type of game, if it's close, that Dame plays like up to 44 minutes or something silly. Terry Stotts has shown that he is willing to do that with his key pieces, Dame and CJ, in the past. So that wouldn't shock me either. So
Stotts' job is also on the line, I think. I know his seat was very hot, and then they made the playoffs as this. They didn't have to make the play-in game, but his seat was very hot. And if they get bounced 4-1 in the first round, I don't know if he survives that. So I think he, like you mentioned, Dame could play 40-plus minutes. I think he's going to ride his guys as much as possible to get this series tied up.
Yeah, no, agreed. Definitely the game of the day to attack, I think.
For sure. All right, man, let's go to the next game of the night. This is the third one. We have at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the Philadelphia 76ers at the Washington Wizards. We have for a spread, we have the Sixers are 5.5-point road favorites, and we have a 229 game total, which is the highest on the slate, a half point over the previous game that we were just talking about. On the injury report for the Sixers, Seth Curry is probable, and Denny Advia, Thomas Bryant, are both out, and Russell Westbrook is questionable for this one. He left the last one, and we all know what happened, which unfortunate, but he left the last game, so we'll have to monitor his status here. But we'll start with the Sixers. And what are you looking at on the Sixers? Can you play the big three? Is it dependent on if Westbrook plays, or what are you looking at over here?
Yeah, I think it's a little dependent on if Westbrook plays. I just really don't see a path for Washington to hang in this game unless Westbrook's playing. Beal has shown that he's pretty capable of carrying the load for Washington and being able to really do a lot offensively, even against Ben Simmons, who's an elite defender. But yeah, definitely pretty concerned about this game. It's always the worst part of these full day slates is we probably won't know whether Westbrook's playing prior to the first game lock-in. So it's going to be with that in mind, like it helps to have some flexibility in your lineups later in the day. Especially, hopefully, we get that news before the Denver-Portland game starts at least, but we shall see. On the Philly side of things, I still like Ben Simmons a ton, no matter whether Westbrook's playing or not. Washington is really fully committed to trying to stop Embiid in the series. We saw Embiid we saw Embiid just like take a lot of outside shots. Hasn't really like shown any of the ceiling that we know he possesses. Isn't really hitting that. Hasn't topped more than 30 minutes in the series. And with all the attention that he's got, Ben Simmons has had a ton of room to operate. We saw in game one, Tobias Harris was the beneficiary of that, with Simmons racking up 15 rebounds, 15 assists, which was how he ended up being a part of a lot of winning lineups. But in game two, we saw Simmons really do a bit of everything, and that's kind of what I expect going into this game. He's going to keep the foot on the gas here, and it's definitely my favorite play on Philadelphia. I think Danny Green also, I hate playing Danny Green in DFS because it just is always such a grind for him to get there. But at 4,300, he's got a locked in role. If this game stays close, even like with Seth Curry and Tobias both hobbled a little, even though they're both expected to play, I think that just opens up a little bit more of a minutes ceiling for Danny. We'll see though. He's kind of a second tier value play to me.
Yeah, and I'm with you on pretty much all that. So I love Simmons' price tag at 7,600. This is just a fantastic matchup against the Wizards, and the only thing like you meant that scares me off a little bit is if Westbrook doesn't play. I expect him to play. This guy plays through pretty much everything. I remember a couple years ago. Multiple times he had surgery, and then in less than a week he would be on the court, and I just thought he was superhuman. So I expect him to suit up for a playoff game, but being 100% and being vintage Westbrook is another story. This game has the potential to be the biggest blowout, and as I say that, I'm looking at Milwaukee and Miami and saying maybe I'm wrong because Miami hasn't shown up all playoffs yet. But yeah, I'm with you on everybody. I think Simmons is solid, or really solid. Probably my favorite play on the team, and he's not high priced at all. Danny Green's a solid role. And then it all depends on how capable Curry and Harris are coming into this game. If they're sort of limited, maybe we can see some more ancillary pieces. If they're ready to go, then I think they just run out their starters until they don't have to anymore.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's just definitely a volatile situation with this game.
Yeah.
I think that sets up well for tournaments, though, right? Like you're gonna have lower ownership on some of these guys. I think I don't think Embiid will be owned at all. Just hasn't shown any like real spark yet in this series, but we know he's capable. So definitely not opposed to tossing him in like large field tournaments.
You took my words for the next team, but I'll let you go first here on who you're looking at on the Wizards.
Okay, so I think that Bradley. So once again, like this game, I think is really interesting for tournaments, and I think Bradley Beal, whether Westbrook plays or not, is really interesting. He's shown a complete capability of going against Simmons and still putting up massive numbers. The shot volume is outrageous. And he's shot really well from the field. What's strange is that he's actually shot terribly from three so far in the series. He's 2 for 12, 1 of 6 in both games, despite taking 23 and 28 shots from the field. So if he can get that three ball going a little bit, watch out. That really opens up the rest of his game, and he can score at all three levels of the court. So at 9K, you're kind of going again. You're in that same price range as Jimmy Butler, who I think will be a lot more popular. So just an interesting piece. And then my second favorite piece from Washington, I think, is Daniel Gafford. I wouldn't be shocked to see Gafford start here. There were some really weird comments from Gafford after the last game talking about conditioning and stuff. And he is clearly their most talented center. And I don't really understand why Scott Brooks hasn't put him into the starting lineup. If they want to play him the most minutes he's capable of, might as well start him on the court and then give him his rest after a 6-minute stint rather than letting him sit to start the game. Down 2-0, this is generally where you might see some changes being made by the coach. And I think that's a pretty easy one to make. So we'll see what happens, but I think Gafford is an interesting secondary piece here.
Yeah, and I'm with you, and especially on Gafford, I want to play him. I've been saying it. He's easily the most talented center on this team, and it's not close. Before he got to this team, they were very bad. I'm not saying he was the entire reason that this team turned around, but if you look at the record after that trade, in games that he's played, they have been awesome, and that's where the entire turnaround has come since they acquired Gafford. Again, he hasn't played a ton of minutes, so I'm not just saying it's completely Gafford, but he's been a big part of this, and he deserves to start. He deserved to start last game. He deserved to start in the beginning of the series. He deserved to start over a month ago. I don't know what's going on with why he's not. I know he gets into a lot of foul trouble, and that's a big thing. He has a lot of foul trouble. Maybe, like you said, conditioning. But either or, he's better than Alex Len, better than Robin Lopez, and he's the only chance they have down low right now to keep this game competitive. When he's on the floor, they're playing winning basketball. His plus minus is easily tops on the team. I'm just not sure why they're not playing him until he fouls out, which I would say he played 35 minutes, but I don't even know if he gets there because he tends to foul a lot. But yeah, I'm with you on him the most, and I really do want to play him. I just hope Scott Brooks plays him, and I do hope it's off the bench just so not everybody jumps on that bandwagon early. But also at the same time, if he's announced a starter, we finally know he's going to break that 20 to 23 minute threshold. Presumably, I should say. Presumably, because I don't know. Scott Brooks might finally realize it in the offseason.
Yeah, Scott Brooks he makes some bad coaching decisions in general to me. He's usually one of the first guys to pull out his players when they're in foul trouble. Doesn't really let guys play through much. So that's definitely a concern with Gafford. But yeah, as you said, like since they picked up, Gafford was probably one of the best midseason pickups in the league. And what I think is like my ideal scenario here is that he does get announced starting, but it doesn't happen until close to when this game is actually starting itself. Because at that point, you'll already have 2 games locked. People will already kind of be stuck in the construction of their lineups. So I think at that point, like it shouldn't affect ownership too much, and we'll be able to get a pretty good number on him.
Yeah, I like that call. He only had 1 foul in the last game. It was very perplexing to me because watching it, they were playing pretty well, especially in the first half. They kept it competitive and were keeping it close when he was in the game. And then he just didn't really play much. So we'll see if that changes, but I'm with you for the most part on there. And Beal, especially if Westbrook is hobbled or limited. At 9K, he might not have 60-point upside, but value is going to be there. He's just going to value on volume alone.
Yeah, completely agree.
All right, man, let's go to the last game of the night. This game starts at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have the Utah Jazz at the Memphis Grizzlies. We have a 224.5 game total, and the Jazz are 5.5-point road favorites. The Blazers are the only home favorite on this 4-game slate. But on the injury report for the Jazz, we have Mia Oni, questionable, and Sean McDermott as out on the Grizzlies. I have a tickle in my throat. I couldn't get his name out while I was trying to cough up. But we'll start with the Jazz, man. And who are you looking at on this team? We saw Mitchell make his return. And not only make his return, but make a splash in it as well, or on the scoring department. But who you like on this side of the ball?
Yeah, so Donovan looked pretty good in his opening game a couple days ago. Like he was shooting the ball really well. He was aggressive, got to the line a couple times. Didn't really do much else outside of that. And like as you can see, only got up to 26 minutes, which I think is the most important thing to consider here. He did step out late in the game to go to the locker room. I mean, it's just really confusing, like what his ailment is at this point. A lot of mixed messaging coming from like the Jazz and Donovan Mitchell's camp regarding his injury rehab and stuff like that. So I think I'm staying away from Donovan here. Just not sure that he's able to get up into the mid 30s in minutes at this point. And I don't think that Utah is really going to need him to either. Been one of the more surprising things thus far in the playoffs, I think, is how well Memphis has played. They've actually really held their own against Utah, obviously winning in game one. And then in game two, they were able to fight back after a pretty large deficit to begin the game. Mike Connolly actually was the guy who took me out of winning a couple GPPs on the last slate. He had a massive game, and I was sweating out Rudy Gobert, and Gobert was having a great game as well. But a bunch of people that had Connolly lineups caught up with me. Don't really know what to do with Mike Connolly here. Like he's sitting at that price tag below 7K, and he's running so much of their offense right now. In the pick and roll, he's passing the ball great. Has just looked great in general. So I think he's an interesting piece, and he's not going to get much ownership either. I think when people see that Donovan Mitchell's back, they just tend to not want to play Connolly, especially when his price is a little elevated. But my favorite play here is Rudy Gobert. I think he's just played so well in this matchup throughout the season. Every time he goes against JV and the Grizzlies, the problem in the previous games is he just hasn't been able to get up into the high minutes, into that minutes ceiling. We saw him get there in the last game though. 36 minutes, 50 fantasy points. That's been around the same rates that he's had in these other games where he's only really averaged around 30 minutes per game. So really like Rudy Gobert again. Don't see any reason why his role should be any different here. And besides that, I'm not really too much of a fan of a lot of these secondary pieces on the Jazz. I think they just balance things out so well that it's really a bit of a guessing game as to who's going to perform well. And I think Rudy Gobert is that one constant that we know what he's going to do no matter what.
Oh, I was on mute. My bad. I was saying, yeah, I'm with you there. I like Gobert, and I do like Conley in this game as well. Speaking of Conley, he's brought a little something against his former team in this series so far, bringing a hefty return in both games. And now he goes back to Memphis, which I'm assuming he's going to get cheered. He did nothing but good things for this franchise, so I don't expect any boos for him, and he's very comfortable in that arena. So I think that's a solid price tag for Conley at 6'8". And Gobert, if he didn't foul out in that first game or was in foul trouble, only played 25 minutes, he would have probably did a similar game that he did in the last one in terms of fantasy points, bringing back nearly 50 or so. If he's playing 36 minutes, this is just a very good matchup. JV is pretty good, but you can get rebounds and you can score in the paint against him at certain points, especially when you're lanky and only do certain putback moves where it's high percentage like Gobert. But yeah, I think Gobert is a very good play. I like Conley as well. And if I'm going to throw in one of these cheap guys, it would be all the way at the bottom of the starting guys in Royce O'Neal at 4,600, just because you know he's going to be playing 35 plus minutes if this game stays competitive. Nothing great there, but he does have occasional hot games where he can play pretty well and bring back a solid return. But he's just someone that if you're down in that range and you're looking and you just want a consistent type of minutes floor, he's a guy that you can feel comfortable with in that situation, just getting 35 plus minutes or so.
Yeah, Royce is one of those like guys that you hate to play, but often fits well into these lineups. Pretty similar to Danny Green in that way, where he often has such a concrete role in their offense and can, like we saw it in the last game, where he hit his threes. He was 4 for 6 from three, and he got 8 rebounds and 3 assists. Yes, it's always a bit of a grind for them to get there and to meet that value, but definitely you always have to appreciate those guys that are out there on the court so much.
Mm-hmm. All right, man. Let's throw it on over to the last team of the night, and the Memphis Grizzlies playing on their home floor now. Series is tied. Who are you looking at here?
So I think that Utah is going to blow out Memphis here.
Woo! You heard it here first.
Yeah, I think that even though going back to Memphis and like with all the hype around their first like home game with this group of guys, I think that this is the perfect opportunity where Utah, who has a really cohesive unit, they really know who they are. They're just a very consistent group. This is where they can really turn on the gas. I think they've figured some things out with Ja over the last couple of games, and they're going to really limit him. I couldn't believe that 47-point game last game. Like,
Ja's been unbelievable.
Yeah, that was like just completely shocking to me how easily he was scoring and how much he was like he shot 20 free throws. They just like couldn't keep him off the line. He was efficient from the field. He's shooting the ball well enough from the outside to at least allow them to respect it, which opens up those driving lanes. But yeah, I really don't like Memphis's chances a lot in this game at all. And with that, not a lot of guys really fall into my player pool on their games here. I think that Dylan Brooks is the best piece in kind of that mid-tier. Issue is he's got the highest foul rate of any player in the NBA, and we've seen that come to fruition over the last handful of games now, where he's had more than 5 fouls in like five of the last 6, I think, or 4 of the last 5. Just makes you nervous when you plug somebody in that's 6,500 on DraftKings that might be limited by their minutes there. I'm staying away from JV. I think that Gobert is just too good of a matchup, too good of a defender, and too good of a matchup against him. So I think Ja, if you're going to pick a piece, to me it's either Ja or Dylan Brooks. These are the two guys that are capable of creating their own shots, but for the most part, really don't like the Grizzlies at all here.
Yeah, and I'm with you for the most part on here too. The Grizzlies, everybody's priced pretty accordingly. I do like Ja, but I also like a lot of other people in that range, so I'm not going to put him in as a definite. But this kid's been showing off this at the end of the season and now in the play-in game and now the playoffs. Bright future and bright present. But I think
what he's doing right now.
Exactly. And I think everybody's pretty priced accordingly, and this team has a tendency to spread the love a lot. And from game to game, like Brandon Clark was in the rotation, and then all of a sudden he wasn't. Xavier Tillman took his spot. Justice Winslow was in the rotation, all of a sudden he wasn't. D'Anthony Melton plays here and there. Desmond Bane goes in and out of the rotation sometimes. Jaren Jackson's return came with fanfare, and now he's kind of like teetering. They go with who they go with. I don't want to say with the hot hand because they change it up all the time. And sometimes it's very hard. And when I'm looking at all the price tags, I'm like, okay, Kyle Anderson. I would like him if he was more of 500 or 5K because I think that's solid. 6'1". I don't love the upside huge, but everybody else is under 4K, and after Jaren Jackson, and they're kind of like a crapshoot on who's actually going to play and who's not. Grayson Allen was playing 30 minutes not too long ago. Now he's playing in the 20s and 19. I think it's hard for me to decide on one of these guys when we have 3 other games where I know where the value is coming, and when I pay for something, I know when I'm going to get there. But I don't mind, like you mentioned Brooks and Ja. They do take the most shots, and they do have the ball in their hands the most on offense, so don't mind going there. But everybody else is kind of, I'm hesitant to go there, and I'd rather find my value somewhere else.
Yeah, I think when you're playing DFS, like there's times to take educated guesses, and there's times to take some like risky plays, but this just isn't one of them. These guys have been priced accordingly to their production and a pretty tight and a much tighter rotation in general. Kyle Anderson, he's shown a lot of consistency. Been over 30 fantasy points a game each time in the series. But yeah, just really don't like a lot of Grizzlies. Grayson Allen looked terrible last game too. He just really struggled out there against the defense from Utah. Even the looks that he did get were painstaking.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. All right, before we head on out of here, I want to ask you who your favorite players on each tier are, or play on each tier is. So we'll go with one for the expensive tier, anything over 8K, and then one in the mid tier, and then one in the value tier. We'll say under 5K for value, and in the middle of, obviously, value and expensive for the mid tier. Play there. But we'll start with the expensive tier. Who is your favorite spend up on this slate?
So there's two guys that I'm kind of thinking back and forth here. I'm going to go with Jimmy Butler. I think that Miami, I'm betting a lot on kind of that Miami culture and that Jimmy Butler toughness, just the mentality that organization and that individual brings here. I don't see them going out 4-0 without a pretty good fight here. Don't really think that Milwaukee's going to blow them out again. I think losing DiVincenzo hurts them. That'll hopefully tighten the game up a little bit. And Jimmy's just going to be out there for as many minutes as he can handle. And I think 8,600 is still just too cheap. Other guy that I was kind of thinking about there was Bradley Beal, but that's definitely a more tournament-oriented play.
All right, I like it. Yeah, and Butler's not a crazy price tag, so you can stick him in with another star or maybe even two in some lineups. So that's a good price tag there. For me, I'm going to go with Mr. Nice Watch, Dame Lillard. For similar reasons, and I know we talked about it before, I think it's just Dame time. They're down 2-1. They're on their home floor. If they lose this game, going back to Denver down 3-1, you can pretty much put a nail in the coffin. This guy, these are the moments that this guy wants and he asks for, and he goes out and takes them when they're there. So I'm going to take a lot of shots at Damian Lillard here at 9,600, and knowing that it's not over 10K, I could probably pair him with like a Jokic if I wanted to as well. But I think Lillard is the guy that I'm going to be heavily targeting here.
Yep, I think that's a good call too. All
right, man. Let's see who's your favorite mid-tier guy? So under 8K here.
Under 8K, I am gonna stick. Okay, I'm gonna stay in that game. Actually, I'm gonna go with CJ McCollum. I played him last game. I really liked what I was seeing from the Portland offense in general. I think that even on a 4-game slate, you can play both Dame and CJ. They both garner so much ball handling responsibility, and they stagger all of their minutes. So whenever Dame is off the court, you have CJ on the court. And just with how much they create offensively, I wouldn't be opposed to playing them together. Obviously, they eat into each other a little bit, limits the ceiling a little bit. But I really like what I'm seeing from CJ lately in the last couple of games. And I think 7,300 is way too cheap for that. And I don't think he'll be that owned either.
I like it. And for me, this is a tough call because I do like the mid-tier guys. I think there are a lot of solid guys in this mid-tier range that I can look to here to bring back value. But if I have to say one, they're all like right next to each other, but I'll pick the guy, one of the three, and I'm going to go with Ben Simmons. I just think it's super, super safe. He's been phenomenal in this series. He's been phenomenal against the Wizards all year, averaging nearly 49 DK points in 33 minutes in the 4 games against the Wizards throughout the season. And I think that continues. And we'll see what happens with Westbrook. If Westbrook plays, then I'm going to have a lot less shares of him because they're just going to blow him out, and I don't want to overexpose myself on the Sixers side of the ball with their stars. But if I expect Westbrook to play, and that means he should be playing 30 or so minutes, depending on the score. It's just a fantastic matchup. So I'm going to go a lot of Ben Simmons here too.
Yeah, no, I like that too. I'm looking at the 7K range, and there's so many guys that I like. Mm-hmm. I think you can make a pretty interesting lineup by going with a bunch of 7K guys and then some value plays. You can almost stay away from the highest tier unless you really want to plug some of those guys in. So yeah, like Gobert, McCollum, Simmons, Drew Holiday,
Yep.
A bunch of really good plays in that range.
And that's the jumble I was looking at when I said I like a lot of them right next to each other.
Yeah.
And Connolly too. There's a lot of guards in that scenario, but yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a lot of good plays there that if you want to do a balanced lineup, especially in cash, it's very good.
Yeah, and I think that what that sets up for is that because of how many plays we're seeing that we like here, and with some of these value guys that we might be able to access, I think it's going to be a pretty high scoring slate relative to some of these other ones we've seen. So just keep that in mind.
I agree with you there. All right, man, and let's throw. Who's your favorite value play of the night? So under 5K.
All right, I'm going to get a little risque here and go with my Bielica call. I'm sorry.
I like it.
I'm sorry to Nemanja. I don't think I'm pronouncing your name properly. Bielica, but I really like what he's set up for here. I think that kind of trial period that Eric Spoelstra used in that fourth quarter of the last game is going to be a change that they make going into game 4. They need to do something differently. They've already put Dragic into the starting lineup. That didn't work. They still got blown out last game. So I think they're going to get a little bit more drastic here. And I think that Trevor Ariza being removed is the easiest way to do that. And I think plugging in Bielica to that kind of core group is the way to go. And he's shown a really good per minute fantasy production in the past. We know his game. He can do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and I like that. And it's very cheap call. You're going near the bargain bin, very, very bargain bin down there. So good call there. For me, I'm looking. There's two factors. I want to know what's going on with the DiVincenzo injury and where those minutes go. I think a lot of them go to Connaughton and Forbes. I'm hoping they more go Connaughton because I would really like him at that price tag. But I'll go with a more surefire thing while we're doing this podcast. Obviously, things change as the day goes on. But I like Monte Morris. I liked him last game. I liked him for that. But I'm going to go with him one more time, $4,500. He went up 300 since the last game. He only played 25 minutes in the last one, down from the 30 that he played before. And as you alluded to, a lot of that had to do with Austin Rivers just going nuclear in the fourth quarter. I don't think that would continue. And if Monte Morris gets back up to 30 minutes, you can see 30 fantasy points. This guy's averaging nearly a fantasy point per minute since he's come back. And that's very good at 4,500.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be looking at playing Morris again as long as the pieces fit. The problem is on this slate is there's so many good guard plays.
Exactly. I was just going to say all my picks are point guards. So there are a lot of guards that I like on this slate.
Yeah, so it's going to be lineup construction is going to be interesting and trying to fit all these guys in. Not a lot of them have forward eligibility either, so you're going to be kind of constrained by keeping that up.
All right, man. So that's it for our podcast. And before we go, is there anything else you want to say to the audience out there?
No, man. So far it's been a really good playoffs for me on the DraftKings side of things, and the DFS side of things. As I mentioned in the first pod we did last week, I only play DraftKings daily fantasy, so don't really know as much about FanDuel and the pricing schemes that they have, different lineup constructions. But so far in the playoffs, so good. Hopefully we can keep that momentum going into the following week.
Awesome, man. And yes, before we go, you can follow us on Twitter if you'd like. My Twitter account is at Santino Cacone. Matt, do you want to throw him your Twitter account?
Yeah, my Twitter account is Matt Cooper 14. Cooper is COO. Yeah, you got it.
All right, awesome. And give us a rate review on Apple. I don't even know the other ones. I just use Apple podcasts. I know people use Spotify and other stuff. I just stick to my Apple podcasts. I forgot the other ones. But give us a rate review. Tell us what you like, what you don't like. We'll try and put something in there. We'll try and take out what you don't like. And then all that other good stuff. Give us all of our accounts on Hoopball. We have a bunch of teams going out there. If you're interested in any of our Hoopball team content, especially on playoff teams. There's so much to go around there. But thank you guys as always for joining us. I don't know if you hear my puppy. He's telling me get off. But thank you guys for joining us, and we will catch you again tomorrow. I believe it will be Mike and Harris on tomorrow. So thank you as always, and good luck in your tournaments, cash games, whatever you're playing.
Take care.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.
Nobody builds 5G like Verizon builds 5G, because we're the engineers who built the most reliable network in America. And the more you do with 5G, the more building it right matters. The more your network matters. The more Verizon engineers going the extra mile matters. It's us pushing us. It's Verizon versus Verizon. 5G built right from America's most reliable network. Most reliable based on rankings from RootMetrics second half 2020 U.S. report of 3 mobile networks. Results may vary. Award is not an endorsement.